Hi there, this is Yolanda. I'm a professional coach. Today, I want to talk about my past 20 years of work experience and share with you the ups and downs that I went through, the challenges that I struggled with, and the learnings that I took after overcoming some of them. How I found jobs, how I found happiness, and how I found purpose. I have a very colorful career history. Starting my career as a programmer, I moved into business roles, had my own company. I also was a professional recruiter for quite a number of years. Did MBA at one of the top business schools, INSEAD. After INSEAD, I went into the red-hot industries of e-commerce and financial technology and served leadership roles in those world's biggest MNCs. Alongside all these, I have an alternate career as a writer and poet, won multiple awards, published 2 books, one fiction and one non-fiction. Some of my works were published in international magazines, including New York Times Travel. Finding my first job was probably the most difficult. So I was a foreign student coming from China, having completed my university studies in Singapore. And my student pass was going to expire in a year. The year of my graduation was 2002, and SARS had struck and Singapore was at the forefront. 10 months after graduation, I still have not found any permanent job. So I remember just applying for any job that I could see, and some of which were even like admin jobs. I didn't care, I just applied. There were also jobs on the newspaper on the weekend edition. So I remember sitting in McDonald's one day, just bringing a stack of my resume and a stack of envelopes. I put the resume in the envelope and then I put the stamp on the envelope. And those days I was using my saliva. It's quite disgusting, I don't know. So I put it there and then I seal up the envelope. So I've sent so many that I was running out of my saliva and I was like, okay, let me use the Coke now. After all these tries, I got an interview from an MNC and I was so happy, but I realized that, oops, I didn't really study in my university and now I actually don't know how to do programming. And they are going to have a technical test testing my skills on C#, which is also a new language. I learned Java. I borrowed a book from the library, C# in 30 days. I basically sat in front of the computer. I used that very thick book to learn the theory and to write the code and to test. And I did that for maybe like 18 hours a day for 1 full week just before the test with the company. And I got the job. It was really an amazing experience. In the pandemic situation, student who came out of university didn't have anything, but just persistence has won me that first job. I had 6 different career transitions, and the first career transition was the most difficult out of all the 6. So I was a programmer for a few years, and I was growing actually very addicted to the programming process. And I remember I used to stay up till like 2 a.m. at night in the office just to fine-tune that logic and that algorithm. I really loved it. But one day when the boss pulled us into the office and asked, Yolanda, when are you guys going to release this feature? And I said, boss, I'm trying to make this super scalable so that in the future when we expand and when we grow, we don't have to come back and change the code. It will be very flexible. So it's going to be very intelligent algorithm. And the boss said, but the business needs it earlier. So I was really shocked because back then, having 2 years of work experience, I was really, really immersed in my world, and I didn't know there's something bigger than that, which is called business. So I became more and more interested in what business is. Business seems to be determining a lot of things, and I wanted to move into a business role instead of staying behind a computer. Those days, for people to move from a back-end programming role into a front-end, either project management or pre-sales role facing customers, either you have a lot of very solid tech background, or you need to be able to speak very well and you can communicate. And I didn't have solid tech background because I only have been doing the job for about 2 to 3 years. And I wasn't really good at communicating because English was not my native language. And I haven't really trained much on speaking as well. But I quit my job because it was becoming increasingly torturous when my heart was no longer there. I quit my job, I started applying, I tried to apply for a lot of jobs, and many people were saying, you're not going to find what you want and every job is just a job. Why don't you go back? But I was just so stubborn and said, no, I'm going to continue to try. So eventually, I actually landed a job as a pre-sales, a role between tech and sales. My biggest learning from finding my first job and making my first career change was really that when you have very limited skills or resources, all you can manage is to apply a lot of jobs. Just keep trying. I did not really care what the JD was saying. If they were saying they need someone with 5 years of experience as a project manager or as a salesperson, I still applied. And I got the job, although they have stated that they wanted more than who I was. But I got the job, that's what matters. How they look at me, it's not something I can decide. The only thing I can decide is to apply for the job or not. It's also very difficult to find a job when someone is freshly coming out of an MBA school, because you have to convince people where you don't have the right experience and you're asking for a lot of money. For me, it was even trickier because I had already quite a few experience before that. I did tech, I did sales, I had my own company, and I was doing recruitment for a few years. So what do you want to do, right? It sounds like this person is so lost and she has moved a lot. But I think that's where my learnings as a professional recruiter actually helped me to land the jobs after INSEAD. I was able to focus on value that I can create, and I was able to focus on who I am or who I was at that point of time from my continuous pursuit of something that mattered to me.
Being able to tell stories that have a lot of either technical or business details into a format that is, easier for listeners to digest. I think that's a learning for me.
I discovered that I can present my CV in a very different way. Whoever that is not in the same industry can also understand my CV, and then also I'm able to apply these skill sets to a different industry.
The second layer was about finding happiness. I think for a big part of my career, I was not happy. And I was not, when I say I was not happy, I was not really unhappy with my job, but I was more unhappy with myself. So there was this constant need and search for betterment, like to improve myself, to become someone else, basically. And when a person is so deadly wanting to become someone else, how can that person be happy with herself, right? So a little bit of my history. I was born in a small town in China, and we moved to a small village after that. So my mom was able to sort of bypass the education system and put me into the primary school when I was only 3 years old. So I became a legend in that place, being known as a child prodigy, because I was able to follow all the way till 15 years old. And I went for the university entrance exam. I got scholarship to come to Singapore to study in the university. So all along, I was always the youngest student of my cohort, and other people would be like 4 years older than me. So that sounds flashy, but actually it created a lot of problems for me because I didn't have real peers. Everyone was so much older, right? And you can imagine how they would not really accept me as part of them. As a result, I didn't have a lot of time or chances to really practice social skills. And as a result, I was shy and I was not sure about myself. If you have lived with all these inner critics and imposter syndrome, feeling constantly inferior, then I'm sure you know how painful it is. And that's exactly what I have experienced. Whenever I did some work or something, I was always telling myself, there is a voice inside me saying, you are so bad, you are terrible, you are stupid. And that would literally bring my mood down to zero, and I just feel so gloomy, and it's so hard to even push through. So even today, I work with a lot of my clients who suffer from imposter syndrome. A lot of them are already, based on external metrics, they are doing very well. They can be senior executives, and they still suffer from this. So how I worked with in this inner critic and imposter syndrome was really not an easy journey. The first part of my journey was I was trying to change, and I was so determined I wanted to change. So that's what led me to move functions as well, because I knew if I continued to be a programmer, I was not going to get a lot of opportunities to train my confidence. Back then, my biggest fear or sadness was coming from me being a shy person and introvert. So I knew I had to move out of comfort zone. So I actively sought roles in that was customer facing, and I actively moved myself into start my own business, into joining this profession of a headhunter, where there were a lot of parties, a lot of extroverts, and that was a business of humans that you just have to deal with people, right? So I thought being an introvert was such a problem that I had to solve. I also got myself into Toastmasters Club, and I trained myself on public speaking. I was learning things like, acknowledge that you are nervous, that will make you feel better. And I love a lot of tricks that actually keep myself very aware of what's going on inside. That keeps myself calm in the outside. I tried a lot, and even though in the days that in my first few client meetings or the first few presentations to the board, I was literally trembling. My legs were trembling under the table, and I was talking, and sometimes I felt like, oh my God, I'm just talking nonsense. But after that, the sense of overcoming something of myself was awesome, because I was like, I'm still scared. I'm so scared, but I did it, right? I did it. And that victory was something I think was my biggest victory, even now when I look back, because the earlier days victory has paved the road for many challenges later in life. So all those kind of things and a lot of inner critique having come through a very achievement-focused kind of education system where you get constantly marked and ranked and measured, right? So with all these, I was always searching, like, how can I prove that my existence? How can I prove that I am valuable and I am worthy, right? To be worthy is almost like you have to do well in the exam, then you are worthy. And when you fail that exam, you are not worthy, right? And but with that mindset, I thought it was serving me very well, and it has driven me towards many achievements in my life. When I was a headhunter, we used to have those scorecard ranks of billing for each consultant in the office. So you pass by, in the office, you pass by this wall and you see how much the person has billed for that month, and then you are number one, number two, and all that. So we had about 100 consultants, and obviously only the top ones will be on the board. Initially, I loved it, and I worked myself to the top. But after a few years of going after all the ranks and the numbers, I started to sense, a sense of meaninglessness, because the board will be wiped off after each month and sometimes after each quarter. And then the whole game, the whole chasing game starts again. So at that point of time, I realized my life question has changed. The first life questions I had in my first jobs were always like, what jobs pay more? What jobs are more important and prominent in the organization? And I decided that sales was, because sales guys always seem to have a say in those days, right? Like it's like the sales guys, the head of sales would progress to the country head and the GM and MD. And I thought that would be a career path for me. But at that point of time, my whole landscape has altered. So from the question of what jobs are paid more, what jobs are more prominent, to what jobs would actually be meaningful. I did quite a number of different roles in the company. I was doing regional brand partnerships, and then I was given the opportunity to head up the e-wallet, which is a financial technology venture within the company. At the time of Alibaba acquisition, I was the first employee to move to Hangzhou to be in Alibaba campus to drive a very important post-merger project, and worked with a lot of senior executives in the group, as well as in some of the billion-dollar Chinese companies, to convince them to come into Southeast Asia and invest in the market. It was such an eye-opener for me, because my mindset then changed from this regional, right? I live in this little red dot and I work with the Southeast Asia region. And suddenly I thought I went to China to learn about China. But once I was there, I realized these guys have the world in their lens. And there they are looking at the whole world from that beautiful city of Hangzhou. I started to see the world, at a much higher level. I look at e-commerce, I look at economies, China, US, Europe, Southeast Asia being a piece of that. And I look at how I started to also understand ecosystems, because Alibaba is not just a company. It has a huge ecosystem that are playing, a lot of companies playing very different roles and attached to the ecosystem. They serve each other and they help each other and they create value together. So with all this, I started to see also what is the future of e-commerce, what is the future of e-commerce in Southeast Asia, and what is the meaning of all this? How is e-commerce contributing to improving the life of people in a remote island in Indonesia? And how is it then serving people in China when people when people are growing tired of these campaigns and find that it's pure consumerism? There is no single answer, but I started to look at things in a very different lens, because when I say meaning and value, I have to first understand what they are. And they are no longer just meanings and values to me, who I want to become, but it starts to grow into something like the values and meanings of what I want the world to become and how I want to contribute to the world. In my reflection, I saw that actually in this world, many things are meaningful. Environment, women's rights, children development, education, many things are meaningful. So many things are meaningful. And I am just such a tiny individual in the world. I cannot possibly do everything, right? So that's why even today, many of my clients are like, okay, I know what are my values. So all these things I value, but how do I choose? So I finally came to this conclusion that I should choose the value that I connect with the most. How do I find the purpose that connects with me the most? As I asked this question to myself, I realized that to have a purpose that connects with me the most, it means I need to be a certain kind of person. And the fact that I already have a preference means I'm already that person. Because imagine if I was not the person and I'm trying to define a purpose, then it's really not about to find a purpose that connects with me most, but to define one, right? Which means I have the liberty to define anything. Therefore, since I'm already that person, I decided to look back into my past to find the trace and the evidences that I have this particular preference. The first thing that came up was when I was a headhunter. So, headhunter as a career, the primary role is actually to help the employers to find the talents for their opening position. To help candidate is kind of secondary and is usually just a byproduct. But I get a lot more sense of fulfillment from the second aspect, which is to help people to bridge through, to cross over from where they are at the moment of this crucial career transition to where they actually want to be. That sometimes can be the information gap where I offer industry insights and also my assessment of their capabilities and also to bring that together. But a lot of times it's also about the mental gap where they have challenges recognizing what exactly they want to achieve and whether or not they want to take a certain career direction. So I knew that I enjoy this deep connection much more than, say, in some of my later work where I have a lot of connections, but none of that is deep. So it comes with quite a lot of self-studying when we see that, some of us who are very talented in deep connection, one-on-one, which is usually a trait for introverts. And some of us are very, very capable and comfortable in connecting with a lot of people and get charged from those kind of activities. And I obviously belong to the first type. And the other thing that came up was also I was volunteering with one of the NGOs. So the NGO runs a helpline to support women in distress. I went through a training, a counseling training for half a year. But of course, what I did in the helpline was not counseling, but to be the first level of support for people who needed the support and to be in the moment, to be there, and help to direct them towards counseling or legal or other support which they may not have been aware of. So I used to do this volunteer work far from my home and after work, after my official job. And by the time I came out, it's midnight, and I have to take a very long journey to come home. But I felt that sense of fulfillment, that sense of doing after having done something I truly value, was filling me. So this sense of happiness and fulfillment, I was asking myself, is it because I felt like I've done a lot for the person? Actually, it's not, right? I knew that I couldn't solve the problem for one. But what I did was significant because when the person needed someone to hear her out, I was there, right? And just the fact that I was being there meant a lot for people in distress. I knew that because I've also been in similar positions and I know how precious it is to just be heard. On the other hand, I knew it can be really insignificant. I couldn't solve it, and even if I solved it, let's say, and the person moves on in life, the person still is the person. She is still the person who walked her own life and made all the effort to make everything work. How significant that is, for my part, it wasn't. Even if it could be indirectly helping. But I still value that so much, and I wonder why. My answer to myself is that the act of touching life is something I really enjoy. I really want to do my tiny bit of work, even if it's very, very minimum. When we look at value, we have to measure the impact, right? So there are two ways of measuring the impact. One is to say the quality, and the other one is quantity. So there are people who are always looking at big scale. So that's quantity of your impact. And I was in the industries in the kind of jobs where I always looked at sort of big picture and say, okay, if we launch this new payment methods, how many hundreds, thousands of people are going to have a new method to use? And that is at the very quantity kind of level. But when I measure impact, to me, the quality matters more. I'm the kind of person who value the quality of impact more. So I want to touch life to individual and mean a lot to each individual versus meaning a little but touching a lot of people. So that is another learning. And the other thing is really to look at what I've always been doing. I saw that I've done talks, I've been doing career coaching even after I changed my full-time career, my day job after MBA. I continued to mentor and coach young professionals. I also supported mid-career professionals in their career transition. So that was something I liked doing, I enjoyed doing, I found meaning in, and that I've always been doing. So with that, there was zero hesitation that I just want to be in this domain of fulfilling my values and touch life as I always wanted to. I hope you enjoyed my sharing about my journey. I'm happy to have a chat. You can always find me at my website, yolandayu.com. Book a 20-minute session and we can talk about how we can work together, either to help you to address immediate survival issue to find jobs, or to look at the upper layer of happiness and purpose. See ya.